Hello, and welcome to the first devlog for the game called Uphill. It's a game about pushing a boulder up a hill. Um, I started this project about a week ago with the idea um, to try to release it in a couple weeks to a month, mostly because I've had a lot of ideas for games that just never really became a full-fledged release, and so I wanted to come up with an idea that was simple enough to make in a couple weeks to a month, but also interesting enough to where it wasn't completely useless and a waste of time. And so that's where this project came in. This first devlog is going to be a bit all over the place because I want to start from the beginning, kind of, and give some information on how I got to the point that I am right now. And so I'm going to recreate the project. For one reason is because I want to rename it to Uphill with no space and lowercase h. Right now it's Up Space Hill, which is just dumb. And then I also want to start getting universal render pipeline set up for lighting. So that's going to be the kind of main goal for me. But I'm also going to, try to give some tips and hints on what I did to get here. There's a lot of work still left to be done. The level is not completely designed yet. There's some bugs with him pushing the boulder and sometimes jumping on top of it randomly. There's still a mechanic that I want to implement where you can grab the boulder and lift it up on your head so that you can lift it up over this little ledge right here. So that's one of the next goals. But mainly we want to get that atmosphere going because there's not really any lighting right now. It looks pretty dull. So yeah, with that I am gonna go ahead and close this out and create a new project. Do a new project, 2D. Let's do Uphill. I could create it from a universal render pipeline, but I think it would be more helpful just to create it from a 2D project. Alright, now we have the project opened, and the first thing I'm going to do is install all the packages that I've bought for this game, which it's going to be in the package manager. So it's going to be under asset store. No. Package manager. There we go. And the packages that I have bought for this project so far are Procedural Legs 2D tool, which is what I use to get the legs working properly. I figured that was going to be a pretty complicated task, and I've tried to do it before by myself and it just didn't work out very well. So I just bought something, it was like 20 bucks. So I'm going to import that. Some other assets I have is the Hyper Casual Flat Character 2D. And that's what the art asset is used that I bought for. It has like, I don't know, 8 to 12 characters in it. I didn't really want to do the art for the characters, so I just bought a pack for that. And then I bought a UI kit called The Stone, and I think that was like 10 bucks or 20 bucks, something like that. And it has like a start menu, pause menu, level select, all that good stuff. So I'm going to install all that, and I'm going to get the main menu scene and the first level scene setup. And I will probably speed this up, do a little bit of a time lapse to get to that point. And then we'll set up the universal render pipeline. Alright, I just noticed that my mic was pretty quiet, so I turned up the sensitivity on it. So we've imported those packages, the GUI kit, the hyper-casual characters, and the procedural legs 2D. But we have some errors. We can't even run the sample scene that comes with the procedural legs. So we're going to take a look at these and get these fixed up. So for the first one, it says that spine cannot be found, so I'm just going to go ahead and double click on this, and it'll open up Visual Studio. It looks like it's just missing a package. This will happen sometimes whenever you buy something. Sometimes either a newer version of Unity, or maybe I just missed something. Maybe they have a README that I didn't look at yet. So it opened up in Unity. And if I hover over it, it says spine cannot be found. Well, let's go ahead and look and see if they have a README. And look at that, they do. And looks like to first download the Spine Unity package. I'm going to do a little bit of quality of life stuff and create a couple folders before I do anything else. First folder is going to be called Sprites, and that's going to contain all the images for the game, including the background, the character, the boulder, and other stuff like that. And then I'm going to create another folder called Scripts, and that's going to contain any scripts that I write for the game. And then I will create they already have a scenes folder. Do they have a prefabs folder? No. So I'm going to create a folder called Prefabs. And this is pretty much something that can be reused. It's really useful for reusing assets or things that you've created in one level and being able to reuse them in the next. It's something that I'm going to use to be able to put the same character into different levels. And then I'm going to create another folder called Materials. And the Materials folder is going to contain different Physics 2D materials. Like there might be an ice material that's like really slippery, or there's going to be a moon material that's really bouncy, stuff like that. And then there might also be like visual materials as well. And I think that's it. Is there an editor? Yes, there's an editor. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy all the sprites, materials, and scripts that I've got so far in the project, and kind of get the scene set up again. I'll probably even copy over the scene if I can do that. And then I'll be right back and we can kind of go into some of the stuff, the design choices for the character, some things to do with the sprite editor, and just some general stuff to do with how I get that set up. But I'm going to go ahead and time lapse this. Okay, I have gotten most of the scene set back up, but I kind of wanted to explain kind of what's going on. So I re-added all the sprites back to the sprite renderer because it's not going to know where they are. But I wanted to show how this is set up. So I have a parallax effect going on. And to do that, or to see that, I'm switching from 2D to 3D view right here. And what I have here is these backgrounds from 1 to 8 set in different Z values. So you can see that over here. This is the farthest one, it's at 1370. And then things get progressively closer and closer to the character. And what that does is it makes it to where whenever the character is moving around, the things that are closer to the camera move faster. So it gives a nice little effect. And then what I'm going to do now is get the character set up, but this takes a little bit more finagling than just setting his sprite to the player. So the player has multiple parts to it, but notice that it's coming from a sprite sheet. And so if I open this up, what it looks like is this. And so we have to split the parts of this up so that we can set them to the chest, head, arms, and stuff like that. And to do that, we can click on it, and then in the inspector you can set it to multiple. And then you can go to the sprite editor, hit apply. And the sprite editor lets you slice the, so I'm just going to set everything to automatic, lets you slice the sprite and set pivot points up for a sprite sheet. And so all of my pivot points that I want are going to be up here-ish. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I will show you how this character is set up. So the idea was to make him very modular so that later down the road we can give the option of character select and like customization to the character for the player. So everything here should be relatively easy to create different sprites and add it to the same rig. And with that in mind, the way that this will work is instead of having to create different animations for every character, which is what you would have to do normally, what I'm doing is using the Procedural Legs 2D package to animate the legs, and then I've kind of created my own little system for the arms. The arms are pretty much like ragdoll almost, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply now that I've finished all of that, and I'm going to go here and start setting these to the proper game objects. So now I get the option to hit this arrow and it spreads everything out and gives me the option to be able to do this now. Drag and drop the chest, head, and all that kind of stuff to the actual character. And what we have here, I need to rename these better, is the actual like eyes and whatnot for the character. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop all these on there in a time lapse, and then I'll be right back. Got the character set up. The next thing that I had to do was install Cinema Machine, which is what I use for the camera. And what that looks like is it basically overrides the main camera using the Cinema Machine virtual camera. So what it is when you create a virtual camera, it's going to create this object called CM-VCam1, and it's going to add this little icon to your main camera, which means it's being overridden by the Cinema Machine virtual camera. And this has a bunch of nice options for creating like a more of like a reactive camera, and it's what I use to make a follow camera. It literally gives you an option to tell it what to follow, and I have this object called camera target, what I tell it to follow. The reason why I don't tell it to follow the actual player is, well, I'll just show you why. So if I set it to follow the player, or better yet, like the chest or something, because the player doesn't matter what I set it to run, honestly, any of these. The reason why I don't set it to this is because the player is actually over here for some reason. It's kind of dumb. I need to fix that, but maybe some other day. So I'll set it to just set it to this, and I'll show you why I didn't, or the reason why I had to set it to this camera target object. So all good and dandy, but whenever you get to an incline, the camera will start to visibly shake. See that? That's because the player has physics bodies attached to it, and so whenever it gets into a collision, it will shake a little bit, so that didn't work. So what I did instead is I added some logic to the game controller to move the camera target to basically the Procedural Legs 2D package that I had already had an object called Player Controller Target Position, which was a great thing for my camera to follow because it was a target position, not the actual position, so it was very smooth. But here's what that looks like. There's only one problem with that, and that's the fact that the player controller target position does not move vertically. So when we start to get up here, the camera is not going to go up. It's just going to be still following this down here. And so what I did was I just created a script to make the camera target position be on the x-axis. It will be the on the x-axis it will be the player controller position target, and then on the y-axis it'll just be the player's position. And that worked out really well. Basically removed the entire problem with the shaky camera. So this is what the camera's target is. And so what that looks like is like this. The camera will go up as well. It's still a bit shaky. Sometimes whenever the player jumps up really high, super fast, it'll be shaky, but it was a good fix for now, so I'm just leaving it. Alright, And then the next thing that well, that's actually pretty much it. There's one other thing I wanted to kind of show. So the legs are animated through the procedural legs thing that I bought, but the arms I could have animated with the tool that they gave, but it didn't really work out very well. They even have an example of like an octopus kind of thing, and I could have kind of mimicked that for the arms, but it just didn't look that great. They also have an example scene. Let's open that up. Sample game where they had this arm, but it follows the mouse, and it's pretty rigid. I'm sure I could have edited it. Oh gosh, I have made changes to the sample game controller, so it's probably not going to work. Long story short is I didn't like the way it looked because it's honestly, I'm pretty sure they were meaning to do that for mostly just legs. So I came up with the idea of doing kind of like a ragdoll thing with the arms. And so what that looks like is having the arms separate, not as a children, so like not as a child, like so the bottom arm is not a child of the top arm, and so on. They're all in the same hierarchy. And what I did was use Hinge Joint 2D to connect them. So the top arm is connected to the rigid body of the head. And then I also use limits to limit the movement, which basically means the arm is allowed to move in this green zone. It's not allowed to move in that zone. And then for the bottom arm, I think that's right. Let me hit play and make sure that I'm correct about that. Let me move him back a little bit. No, I was kind of wrong about that. So it's more like that's like the, so you see this line right here? If that's only allowed, so I was kind of right. That's only allowed to go across like that. So, for example, that line right here for this bottom part of the arm is right there. So you can see if I kind of try to finagle it a little bit. It's actually probably just easier to see on the top arm. See how that's moving like that? You kind of have to play around with it and see how it works. But basically, I use a combination of the limits and the hinge joint connections to make the arms kind of like a rope. So the bottom is connected to the top, the hand is connected to the bottom, and you can see that right here. Connected rigid body is bottom arm, so it's connected to this one. And the way this works is you have to make sure that the anchors are properly set. So notice that the anchor's right here, right for that one, the anchor's up here for that one, and to do that, you have to go to the sprites sheet. You have to go to the sprite editor and make sure that you actually set the anchor point where you want it. Otherwise, it's not gonna look very good. That's pretty important for this part of the whole setup. And then so for the hinge joints, when you add a hinge joint, it'll add a rigid body, and I just left those as the default settings. And then I also added a capsule collider to the bottom arms. I didn't add it to the hands because I wanted the hands to kind of go through the rock a bit, so I wanted it to collide actually with the arm. So I added a capsule collider, and that's what this is. And that's what actually collides with the rock whenever he's like pushing it. The hands, on the other hand, have a circle collider, and that's used to grab it, actually. I have a script called grab, and that's literally allowing me to hit the left mouse button, and whenever the circle collider and the rock are colliding, it adds a fixed joint to it and sets some settings for it for the connected anchor. And it basically just adds a fixed joint to it and tells that the connected body is the hand. And so that's what I use to grab the rock. This target joint right here is something that I programmatically have done to make it seem like he's pushing the rock. What happens is when he gets close enough to the rock, so first of all, he's constantly shooting out this raycast from the center of his mass towards the rock. And whenever it gets close enough, the hands will set their target joint. So notice that if I'm far enough away, the target joint is not enabled. When I get close enough, it'll set this target joint to these locations. And it changes like every 1 second-ish, half a second maybe. So the target joint's target will change by a couple pixels to make it look like he's kind of like, ooh, let's grab this rock over here, kind of thing. And so that's how I did the arms. And then, yeah. One other thing that I did that might not be obvious is that there's this box over here. I actually need to move it over a little bit. That limits the characters to not be able to run off the edge to the left. And that literally just has a layer called constraint. That collides with the character. I do need to make some changes to it because you can see how it's still trying to set its target position way over here. It makes the character look really glitchy. But for now that'll work. So now I'm gonna go ahead and set up the lighting stuff. So I'm kind of just following this video that I've watched to get it set up. It says the first thing I have to do is, well, install the package for it. And it's called Universal RP. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Window, Package Manager. Well, actually before I do this, I'm going to make sure, there was part of the video where he said that it's kind of a permanent change. So I'm going to go ahead and make a save of this project using GitHub. So currently on my alpha 1.7, I'm going to add everything. I'm just gonna merge this into alpha. Alright, well that's merged into alpha. I'm gonna push this up. For those of you who don't know what GitHub is used for, it's basically a versioning tool. It lets you use branches and commit history to track your progress. And if something breaks, then you can go back to an older version without having to do a bunch of finagling. So for example, I have just merged my current changes into alpha, which means that if I break something on my alpha 1.7 branch while I'm doing this universal render pipeline changes, I can literally just go git checkout alpha and I'd be back at where I was before I made those changes. So it's something that's really nice to get in the habit of. Alright, now I'm going to go to the package manager and install. I'm going to switch to Unity registry. It's under Universal Render Pipeline. Hit install, and I will be right back. I think what I'm actually going to do is just do a time lapse of me setting this up, and I will link the video that I watched to learn how to do this. Because I don't really feel like making a tutorial. I'm kind of just using this as a progress and devlog, so. And I'm sure they explain it much better than I could. So I will see you when I am done with that. Alright, I got universal render pipeline set up, and now I'm going to go ahead and start adding some lights to this. Alright, I've added some lighting to the level. What I did was I added a sprite light to the boulder, and that just gives the boulder a little bit of light. I added a point light 2D up here, and that gives off this shadow by having a shadow intensity set here. Probably change the target layers. I don't really know what that does really. But the way that works is I added a Shadowcaster 2D to the this level right here, and edited it to be like this. I did some finagling right here because I also wanted to have a shadow being casted from right there. And the way that works is that notice that this one won't actually give off a shadow down here unless it's down here, obviously. So what I had to do is add another point light down here and make sure that the radius was small enough so that it doesn't hit this invisible border over here, right there. What I could have done, I realized this after the fact, is change the rotation of it to, I don't know, something like that, and then change the angles to something like that. That way it wouldn't even get over there. But yeah. So now we've got some good lighting in here. It already looks a lot better. I should probably add some light to the character. But let's go ahead and hit play and show you what we have so far. I think my favorite part is that now when the boulder does go in the cave, you can really tell. Look how light the boulder is right now. You see that little shadow being casted from up there. Then down here the boulder is a lot darker. Trying to grab it. There we go. think what I also want to do is add some shadows to these trees back here, but I'll do that next time. I think that wraps it up for this first devlog. I think the next thing I want to do is add the ability to raise the boulder over your head so that we can actually finish this level off. 'Cause that's what they're supposed to do here. They're supposed to raise it up and jump it over there. That's the end of the first level. But I will see you next time.